Free socks.
Welcome to the Stop the Earth podcast. Let's take a look at our world and talk about how we can change the way we disagree with each other and spread positivity. And now your hosts, John and Melinda.
And welcome back to episode number 2 of the Stop the Earth podcast. Oh, I got a little loud there. Hold on. Yeah. Stop the Earth podcast. I am John.
I'm Melinda.
I don't know if we have to do that every time. Let's try it again. I'm John.
I'm Melinda.
I'm Melinda.
I'm John.
Oh, there you go. No, you're not. Anyway, sorry, that's idiotic. I'm biased. What is the name of today's show? It is...
I'm biased about fallacies.
Yes, I'm biased about fallacies. So what we're going to talk about is, you know, in the first show, we kind of gave you a smorgasbord, a buffet, if you will, of all of the things, the different topics, and just kind of a quick overview of the things that we're thinking that Stop the Earth should cover in the future and that kind of thing. We brought up logical fallacies. We never really got to them in the show. I think I said later, and then we never got to them.
We never, yes.
So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about, because the whole idea is self-introspect, is to look at ourselves, to be the change, to bring positivity into the world. We have to look at our own behavior. We can't change everyone else. We can change us and lead by example, and we can help to hopefully start a movement that everyone around us will go, hey, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. My mind has changed. It's okay to be wrong. All these things. And, you know, we'll see a little bit of change.
Exactly. Have good discussions with others. Help them to have good discussions with us. And that's how we'll see that change.
Yeah, so today's program is we're going to look at biases. What causes us to think the way that we think? You know, what are these things that whenever someone's talking to us or whenever we see a piece of news or a fact that drops out of the internet or something and we're looking at it, what determines whether or not we believe it, accept it, spread it, you know, that kind of thing? Or, you know, do we have certain biases that keep us from accepting truths? You know, I know that there's some people that if they tell me something, I'm more apt to believe them. I think a lot of it has to do with also the degree of whatever claim they're making.
That's always a big part, I feel, and how they present it.
If I say, I have an invisible dragon in my garage.
I don't believe that, John.
That's not real easy to believe. I would need to
and I believe a lot of things you say, and I would.
I would have to present
the dragon.
Right. That's a big claim. I would have to present some big proof.
Correct.
But just like I believe it was Hitchens who said that claims without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. So, but yet if I said I'm drinking hazelnut coffee today,
very believable.
It's believable because it's just a little claim, and it's very likely. You know, there's no real reason for me to lie about that. You know, it's possible. It could be probable. You know, all of that. Like it's easier to accept that as a truth, but yet our biases also play a part in that, and that's what we're going to look at first, and then we're going to look at some of the what fallacies, logical fallacies. But that was a little pause of just nothingness there. So you can follow along with us. I love these two websites. If you go to Your Bias, that's YOURBIAS.is, your bias is, and then also yourlogicalfallacyis.com. Those two things, those two websites, you can follow along. I just use them as a quick reference point to determine whether or not I'm thinking correctly about something. Whenever, it's good to kind of read these things and then recognize in yourself whenever you have one of these feelings or a bias or a fallacy that you're trying to cling to, and then you can apply it to your beliefs and kind of adjust accordingly. Mm-hmm. But this is an ongoing thing. As much as I like to think that I've reached enlightenment and I can have a calm, rational conversation with people, and I don't, I don't have any biases and I can listen to something, I still have a tendency to, if I hear something that I agree with, I want to believe it quickly. Mm-hmm. And then if I hear something I don't agree with, I want to be like, I want to prove this wrong.
It's easy to slip back into comfort of how you've responded for a majority of your life. It's also easier to just accept or discredit without having to work for the information, without having to find the evidence, determine yourself if the claim is correct. It's just easier, but it's not the best way.
Right, yeah. To just sign on. Oh, I like this guy. Right. This guy believes like I believe, so therefore I'm just going to sign on whatever he says.
Exactly. Or on the opposite end, oh, that's not how I've always thought of it, so it's not right.
Right. Well, and you see some of the shows out there that they have, like, and I'll just, from a political standpoint, like if you have Obama or Trump, mm-hmm. And you use quotes from both, if you go to Obama followers and you or not followers but voters, it's not like a cult, but so if you go to Democrats and you show a popular Republican quotes, but you attribute those quotes to a Democrat, they're going to agree.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And vice versa. And it's because people just want to sign on to their, they're not looking at the substance.
Correct.
They're just looking at, oh, so-and-so said that, then yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And then you go, well, that was actually President Trump. Well, yeah, no, that was an idiotic statement. No, wait a minute. How about you evaluate the statement independent of who said it?
Correct.
And then determine whether or not it has merit and stands on its own. And that's what we want to do. The first bias, if we reference the website, is anchoring. So the first thing that you judge influences your judgment of all that follows. And real quickly, I don't want to just read the whole website to you. Human minds are associative in nature, so the order in which we receive information helps determine the course of our judgments and perceptions. If the first price offered for a used car sets an anchor price, that will influence how reasonable or unreasonable a counteroffer might seem. So if I said I'm selling this car for $1,000 and it's like an old beater or whatever, and you're like, I don't know if it's worth $1,000. It's more like a $500 car. That's your first thing that you've judged, is how high that price is. And now if I go, well, how about $750? Well, I've come way down.
Yep.
And
it sounds good.
Right. And so you're more apt to accept that. But if I would have said it's $750 and you thought it was cheap and then went up, either way, the first thing that you hear sets the tone for your judgment on everything else.
Yep.
So that's what anchoring is, and I guess, so it says be mindful of this bias during financial negotiations, houses, cars, salaries, things like that. So the initial price offered has proven to have a significant effect, which I guess makes sense when you think about the way salesmen do. I used to be in sales for a long time, advertising sales. So I would we would generally present 3 packages as one of the, and it's not a trick as much as it is just you just kind of feed off, you know how human behavior is in sales. So you're like, okay, if I go out there and I know that this guy's budget is $500 a month and I want all of it, So I want to offer a $1,000 a month package, a $500 a month package, and then a $250 a month package. And he's probably going to want to take the one in the middle, because no one wants to seem cheap. No one wants to seem like they're spending all of their money or way too much money. So they'll pick something in the middle 9 times out of 10. And, you make the big package look really good, and then the middle package is perfect.
What they need.
Exactly what they need. And then the little one is just really sparse.
Yeah, missing some of the things that they need.
Right. So, and you kind of lead them in the way. So you give the illusion
they're
of choice.
making a choice.
And you do that a little bit with anchoring, because the first thing I always presented was the big package. I mean, just start here.
And then they're all freaked out.
Right. And they're like,
I can't afford this.
That's so much, And you're like, yeah, it's $1,000 a month, but you're going to get, 100 ads a month. We're going to put you on website banner ads and, and this back in the day, you'd be like, your own GeoCities page with a flashing under construction. Anyway, so yeah, that anchors them, and then you offer something cheaper, and then they buy into that, even though that's kind of what you wanted them to.
That was your goal in the first place.
Right. We've spent way too much time on the whole anchoring. I'll let you do the next one.
All right. So the next one is the sunk cost fallacy. You irrationally cling to things that have already cost you something.
Have you heard of any of these?
So the first one I have, this one I have not.
I'm exact opposite.
Really? Oh,
I've heard of this one,
and not
but not the other one.
But you did the other one.
But I did the other one on a regular basis. I just didn't know it was called anchoring.
So this one, when we invested our time, money, or emotion into something, it hurts us to let it go. And if that isn't true, I don't know what is. This aversion to pain can distort our better judgment and cause us to make unwise investments.
This is straight up the stock market. So
this is straight up relationships.
Well, yes. Well, yeah. Look at the two different viewpoints. The guys, this is money,
and this is love.
So if you look at it and you think, all right, I have $10,000 in savings, and I'm going to put, $5,000 into. I'm going to buy this stock because this is a hot, cool stock or whatever, and then it starts plummeting, and you're like, oh God, I've invested so much. I don't want to give up on that.
Give up on what? Yeah.
And of course, the thing is, like, you can either sink more into it or cut your losses and just go. And I think the sunk cost fallacy is there are times when it's time to just say, you know what, it is what it is. I've or you're a failing business. I keep sinking money into a business, or I keep trying to get him to love me. Right.
Yep. You see it on Facebook, on social media all the time. Don't continue to make a mistake because you spent a lot of time making it. And that's kind of...
Well, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, you just have to let it go sometimes. It's you're not... let's see, this one says, to regain objectivity, you should ask yourself, if I had not already invested in something, would I still do so now? And then what would I tell a friend to do if they were in the same situation? So basically, it's okay to walk away from something. If you started like a business and it's failing, maybe just because you've invested half of your fortune into it,
don't invest the other.
Don't invest the other half. Just call it a wash, be done, call it a learning experience, and walk away. Is one way to look at it. The next, the availability heuristic. So your judgments are influenced by what springs most easily to mind. You like Reddit, I like Reddit.
That's a fact.
Facebook as well. I see this one all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Your judgment is influenced by what springs most easily to mind. So emotionally powerful memories can make things seem more relevant. For instance, when we see reports about homicides, child abductions, blah, 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 we suddenly make believe that these events are more common and threatening than is actually the case. People always talk about Well, it's just so dangerous out there now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just everywhere. You see the kids getting abducted. I wouldn't let my child walk home from school. Like, that's a thing. Like the lady that let her 7-year-old ride the subway in New York. It was
And then child protection got called.
Yeah. You remember that story?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking back to when I was 7, I would ride my bike, 2-3 miles away and be gone all weekend. We didn't have cell phones. Nobody knew where we were.
Right. Just be home before the street light turns on was always my thing.
There's no Amber Alert.
Mm-mm.
Now, if you look at the actual statistics, crimes against children are down. What was it? There was a guy the other day that was talking about this is the best time in all of history to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the lack of crime and violence and the standard of living for even the most poor. When you think about poor people in America, they don't even really know what real poverty is in a lot of cases. And I don't mean to
Dismiss struggles.
Yeah. But when you still have a TV and even an old beater car, and you have the internet, and you have a cell phone, and you have, maybe
running water,
right? Heat, air conditioning, things like that. Even though you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're in debt or whatever, there are people. It's all a matter of perspective. There are people in the world who would like to, not have to walk 10 miles for clean water. Who would like to be able to have more than half of their children live.
Yes.
That's a crazy thing when you think about the the rate of births, and what is it, the infant mortality rate? That's what I was looking for. How that has increased over the years. It used to be kind of a coin flip whether or not a woman would survive childbirth. Yep. And it's not so much anymore. And so these are things to really look at and go, wow, it's maybe I actually look at relevant statistical information instead of just relying purely on first judgment and emotive influences.
Correct.
So that was the availability heuristic. Next one.
The curse of knowledge. Once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone. I guess that does make sense as well.
So things make sense once they make sense, and it's hard to remember why they didn't make sense. So we build complex networks of understanding. Okay, so basically what this is saying, when teaching something new to someone, go slow and explain to them like they're a child without being patronizing, and repeat key points to facilitate activity. All right, so this can be best expressed through math, I think.
I feel like this is my relationship right here. Whenever he's trying to explain something to me or he says something I don't understand, I always say, explain to me like I'm 5, please.
Right.
And then he'll step back and say, oh, okay. She doesn't know what's going on.
Who's he?
Terry, my boyfriend.
Oh.
Yes, he.
You're playing the pronoun game.
Yes. And so that I'm very knowledgeable on this subject because I just say, explain to me like I'm 5. Stole that from Reddit, but have you seen that subreddit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that subreddit. So I do think this is a struggle for a lot of people.
Math for me, I'm more on the creative side of things. I'm more on, and I know that, it's almost a trope now to say, oh, I'm bad at math. And I'm not bad at math, but it takes me more effort. Like I actually have to make an effort to do advanced math. Like I can't just, I can do a lot of stuff in my head, but when it comes down to stuff that's, it just doesn't come easy to me. Right. Yeah. I'm like, what? Wait, hold on. I have to actually think, stop. And, but my cousin is a mathematician. Like that's his thing, like hardcore. He's like got a doctorate in math, and he looks at stuff and he's like Goodwill Hunting, and I'm like, dude, you need to explain this to me. And if you already know something, That's what this is, the curse of knowledge. If you know something and you got to that, it's easy to assume that everybody knows what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains why we're like, you might even know these biases, Mr. Listener, Mrs. Listener. You might know the logical fallacies that we're going to go over later. And again, I know some of these. Melinda knows some of these. It's a review. It's self-introspective. It's to go back and say, wait a minute, let's just look at this and then try to, if we're cognizant of these things in our thinking, we can prevent ourselves from being fooled or from jumping to conclusions, or and this helps us just in critical thinking as we move forward.
Correct.
So that's the whole idea. So the curse of knowledge was that one. Next one's confirmation bias, and I think we're all familiar with. See, there we go. Curse of knowledge. I think we're all familiar with this one. I just got done saying that. You favor things that confirm your existing beliefs.
Oh yes.
My gosh. I want to reach through the microphone and just shake people on Facebook and say, listen to me. This is the one where you have a belief and you Google, what proves my belief? And so everything that pops up, you're like, see, I told you, this is mine. You think of your beliefs and ideas as software that you're actively trying to find problems with rather than things to be defended. Your first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Richard Feynman there, who, I try to make it a point. Now, this is an exercise that I do when I think of something and I'm like, okay, I believe X. What are the opposing viewpoints to X? Mm-hmm. So I go out of my way to try to disprove what I want to believe first, always. And that sucks. Like, it's not easy. But that's one of the first things I started doing years ago was, okay, I was wrong on this thing. What else am I wrong about? And so I tried really hard. It's a constant effort to not fall into confirmation bias.
Well, and I think a good thing with doing it that way, trying to find things that maybe contradict what you're believing, is if you do research and end up determining that you had it right all along, when people come to you to try to contradict you, you're already going to know those arguments. You're already going to say, hey, I actually looked into that, and this is what I found out about it. And You'd be able to give them some knowledge on their first reaction to the subject.
Right. Oh, no, that's a good point. Without trying to be, and again, it's not that you can't ever come to a conclusion. Like, I don't want people to think that I sit here in indecisiveness on everything. There are a lot of things that I believe and believe firmly and strongly. But I've come to those beliefs with evidence and by going, putting them through a trial by fire, per se. Okay. So, yeah, confirmation bias. That's one of those things you see on Facebook where someone's like, this completely, you'll find something, it's usually a meme that agrees with you, and so you immediately share it, and you don't stop to think, is
there truth behind this?
Right. I saw one of my friends the other day post something about, what was it? He's posting stuff like with using only agree or disagree. Post an unpopular opinion is what it said. And so one of the very first ones was, I believe all welfare recipients should be castrated and or like unable, like chemically made to where they cannot reproduce. And this is what this guy said. And like so many people underneath him were agree, because it was just this there's this emotional response to immediately think this person is getting something for nothing. They're getting
unfair. Something I'm not.
They're getting something from me.
From me.
I'm paying taxes and they're stealing from me or whatever, and they're not working. So there's this automatic assumption. But you're not considering the severity of what you're putting on this person. And I mean, this is why this show exists. As you take something like that, and even if you want to immediately emotionally agree with him because you disagree with the way that the welfare system runs, and perhaps you think there should be some reforms in the system, the hyperbole, the extreme example of castration, chemical castrating people who are on what? Oh my God, what is America?
Right.
What are we standing for? The freedom, what kind of totalitarian tyrant governmental entity
Would do that.
would do that? And because you see it with prisoners too and things where someone wants to, or like a policeman. Here's another one. A policeman tackles a jaywalker and beats him to death, right? And because the jaywalker's like, I got rights, I ain't got to stop, man, you leave me alone or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't comply immediately, so the police officer beats him to death. And you see in the comments online where people are like, well, he should have complied. He should have just listened. And although that is true.
Yeah, nobody's saying ignore the cops.
I mean, I believe, yeah, you're right. He should have complied, but he wasn't doing anything wrong other than walking across the street. So even though he is wrong, okay, does he deserve death? And that's where in the monkey sphere, like we were saying, we don't care about this random stranger, and we're like, why didn't he listen to authority? But what you need to do is understand that that's a fellow human being. And what if it were your daughter or son or someone? And this guy was put to death, or your daughter or son was put to death because they walked across the street at the wrong place, the wrong time. I mean, that's an actual news story. This actually happened a while back. And
jaywalking has never killed someone else. I suppose jaywalking, you could kill yourself, but
even if it had, maybe it caused someone once to swerve off the road. But that's still not it's not a punishable by death offense. Just like having a small amount of marijuana doesn't make you this huge hardened drug cartel criminal
who should never be able to hold a job ever again.
Right. Like at what point do we say enough is enough on that? Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on all the tangents, but confirmation bias. You tend to favor things that confirm your existing beliefs. Take a moment, consider the opposite possibility. Consider that maybe you're jumping to a conclusion based on a thing that you already have. I love this one. I always talk about this one. I'll let you have it.
I don't know this one. So, correct me if I'm wrong. The Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yes.
Okay.
The Freddy Krueger effect. It's when you fall asleep and people stab you. I'm just kidding.
I don't like this one. Okay, so this one is actually, the more you know, the less confident you're likely to be. Because experts know just how much they don't know, they tend to underestimate their ability. But it's easy to be overconfident when you have only a simple idea of how things are. Oh, yes.
This is the American Idol effect. You have that one cocksure contestant that gets on there, and they sound like me singing.
Yes.
Where they think they can sing, and and again, the Dunning-Kruger effect is more likely. It works both ways. So if when you first learn about something, you are cocksure. You're like, wow, I have just, and you see this in college students a lot. They graduate with a degree in marketing or something, say. And then it occurs to them that they know everything there is about this subject.
Best ever.
And then you get out into the real world and you start to see that everything you just learned it's the tip
scratching the surface.
Just the tip of the iceberg. And so that's, but yet experts, do you ever feel, I mean, I'm sure you're an expert in some things, and I feel like I'm an expert in some things. And do you ever feel like, oh, I'm not that good?
Yes.
Like imposter syndrome, like where you just
100%. Or you're like, I feel like I have a grasp of this, but there's probably this whole other portion of it that I'm missing.
So the Dunning-Kruger effect explains
Facebook.
Yeah, and well, I mean everything. It seems like all of these you can just
Explain
scroll through
Facebook.
Facebook and go, "Oh, there it is. There's this. There's that." That would be fun. No, we haven't had any. I know that this is show number 2, and soon, hopefully, as our following grows and as it spreads, people will start to write into the show or follow us and participate.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, I would love to play that with people. Show us example. Let's post examples. Like highlight the names out.
Yes, please do. We don't want to be responsible for any of that.
but yeah, all the identifying information. But post in the comments below examples of these biases or things where people on Facebook or other social media post. But the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think when you learn something,
You're excited about it.
but you don't even know what you don't know yet.
Exactly.
And
And you're so excited about it that you just want to jump the gun with the knowledge that you do have now.
right. And then once you become an expert, you're aware that there's so much that you don't know that you finally know what you don't know,
Exactly.
which, I don't know. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And Bertrand Russell said the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, yet wiser people are so full of doubts. And I think that this also goes right along with Stop the Earth. We have to admit our shortcomings. We have to look at ourselves and go, we can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And accept that it's okay to be wrong again. Accept that, you won't grow. You won't really attain knowledge or enlightenment or fulfillment there at that point until you admit that I don't know everything. Mm-hmm. Which is very hard for me to do. It's very hard. I mean, it is. It's just one of those things. I think we have a tendency to be too sure of ourselves.
Yes.
Then anyway, next one. We're just going through this whole website here. Belief bias. If a conclusion supports your existing beliefs, you'll rationalize anything that supports it. It's a little bit like confirmation bias,
I agree.
I think. But this might fall into a more like a religious type thing. If you believe in something and something seemingly supports it, you'll backtrack and find reasons to support that. That as long as it coincides with your belief.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than and I would say I was going to use an example, but I don't think we're ready for that yet on the show. Because I think that would be too controversial. And I think before I want everyone to know, because people are just kind of dipping their toe in the show at this point in episode 2. And we're just getting to the point of what is this show all about? What are we actually discussing? What am I being entertained by this or not? So I don't want to just start throwing out controversial
Scare people
things
away
and get people to be like, not yet. Not until we're all ready to discuss them with calmness and you can call in and show me where I'm wrong. And I can go, you know what, you're right. I had not thought about that. Mm-hmm. Or, no, I still think you're wrong. And whatever, I would agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. But so a useful thing to ask is, when and how did I get this belief? We tend to automatically defend our ideas without ever really questioning our beliefs.
I think that is something common. Okay, so the next one up, self-serving bias. You believe your failures are due to external factors, yet you are responsible for your successes.
The blame game.
The blame game. Many of us enjoy unearned privileges, luck, and advantages that others do not. It's easy to tell ourselves that we deserve these things while blaming circumstances when things don't go our way.
Okay.
So pretty much just I'm awesome and I'm responsible for that awesome, but when I'm not awesome, that is not my fault.
When judging others, be mindful of how this bias interacts with the just world hypothesis, fundamental attribution error, and the in-group bias. So when we're looking at someone else,
I feel like this would be another good one maybe to talk about with that Facebook post you were talking about, chemically castrating welfare recipients.
right?
Where maybe if the individual who suggested that would take a step back to look at the fact that, you got pretty lucky you're not in their shoes. It just takes one catastrophe for any of us to be in those shoes.
Right. It says fostering humility can help countermand this tendency while making us nicer humans. So if you really think about it, if you look at someone that's in a circumstance that you're not in, and basically, you want to be like, hey, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but you don't know that person's circumstance. You don't know what they've been through.
Yep.
It's easy for you to sit back and with this self-serving bias of, I built myself up. Of course, I did inherit $200,000 from my great aunt who died, and therefore it helped me build my business. And
Right.
although you forget about that because you built yourself up. You forget about the people that helped prop you up along the way. But then you look at this other person who maybe didn't have the same help, and you judge them. Well, why can't you pick yourself up?
Right.
That's basically what this is saying.
Yeah, I think that's another one of those that you hear all the time, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But people don't realize that some people don't even have the boots.
Right.
You were lucky enough to have the boots where you could pull on those straps.
In a similar, there's a analogy here. I forget the story, but it was talking about poor people's boots and how a rich man might have 4 or 5 different pairs of boots. A boot that you can wear here, a boot that you can wear out to eat, and one boot for working and one boot for casual wear. Whereas poor guys got to wear one pair of boots and ends up spending more in the long run than the rich guy did on boots on all of his, because he wears that pair out and has to
Quicker.
buy a new pair or get those repaired. And through the lifetime of having to buy cheap boots, you end up spending more being poor than you would if you could just buy one quality boot. And I don't know. I mean,
that makes sense.
But
it's true.
Might not pertain to the topic, but it was interesting to me.
Good story.
The backfire effect. Some aspect of your core beliefs is challenged. It can cause you to believe even more strongly. I've heard of this, and this has been one of the issues online and even in this program, that the reason why I wanted to start this program is to teach us to not do this. This was the number one thing that bothered me, is that when you challenge someone's beliefs, do you remember the old story when we were in grade school or whatever? I know I'm substantially older than you, so we're not in grade school together. But when the wind and the sun were arguing about who can remove the guy's jacket, they're both looking down at the guy walking down the street, and the sun's like, he's super nice and everything, and the wind is like, I'll tell you what, the wind's a blowhard, which is funny. But so the wind's like, I'll tell you what, I bet I can blow the coat off that guy. And so he starts blowing with all of his might, and he's putting all of his force, and he's blowing the guy's coat.
But the guy's just holding it tight.
Guy grabs the coat and he pulls it tight, And he holds on for dear life. And then the son says, all right, it's my turn. And he smiles. And all that warm energy warms up that guy. And he just takes his coat off without any resistance at all. That is the backfire effect. It's when your beliefs are challenged, you have a tendency to
hold on tight
to that coat and to really not want to believe that something can be challenged. And you hear it all the time. I actually saw a guy where it said, and this is a different, but think about this, okay? This is a religious example, and I know religion is one of those things, but there was a guy that said, if I read in the Bible that 2 + 2 = 5, I would believe that 2 + 2 is 5. Just because it's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously we don't have to deal with that because it's not. But you can, just because your beliefs are challenged, you shouldn't hold on tighter. Maybe you should examine your beliefs.
Correct.
And that's the whole point of the backfire effect. What's that Mark Twain quote?
It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
There we go. The Barnum effect.
You see personal specifics in vague statements by filling in the gaps.
All right, so what's this one? Psychics, astrologers, and others use this bias to make it seem like they're telling you something relevant. Consider how things might be interpreted to apply to anyone, not just to you. So this is like
astrology, zodiac signs.
Yeah, basically where
I'm a Gemini.
we want to make connections. I am too. Well, what a coincidence.
Let's
make a connection there.
This is...
We should do a podcast together. So the combination of our egos wanting validation with a strong inclination to see patterns and connections means that when someone is telling us a story about ourselves, we look to find the signal and ignore the noise. So that's the Barnum effect. Let's power through these a little bit quicker. We're at like 43 minutes and we're only on biases, and I don't want to have another show just for fallacies. So groupthink. You let the social dynamics of group situation override the best outcomes. This is Reddit. Dissent can be uncomfortable and dangerous to one's social standing. So the most common and confident voice will determine group decisions. Because of the Dunning-Kruger effect we learned about earlier, the most confident voices are often also the most ignorant. So rather than openly contradicting others, seek to facilitate objective means of evaluation and critical thinking practices as a group activity.
Oh, we should get a Reddit group activity going.
Well, that's what we're doing. We're without Reddit. Stop the Earth. That's the whole point of this, where it says, seek to facilitate objective means of evaluation and critical thinking practices as a group activity. That's what we're doing.
That's us, yep.
So we're using your suggestion, whoever made this site, which is fantastic. I love these two sites, and I don't know, maybe we will look and give credit and links in the description to these as well. But yeah, totally the whole point of Stop the Earth is to stop ourselves, self-introspect again, and change the way we think. Negativity bias. You allow negative things to disproportionately influence your thinking. Pain and loss and hurt are felt more keenly. I'd say pro and con lists, as well as thinking in terms of probabilities, can help you evaluate things more objectively than relying on cognitive impression. So what is this one? It says, in an evolutionary context, it makes sense for us to heavily bias to avoid threats. So negativity bias, we have a tendency to, let's say we're going to, there's a big life change coming. We put more weight on the negative outcomes, which could lead to anxiety and everything else, than the positive possibilities. So if there's a danger, if it's dark and scary down this road, we notice that it's dark and scary, even though at the end of the road,
Or even though it's the shortest.
right, it's the shortest. The end of the road is our destination, but we have a tendency to overly weigh the negative.
So kind of just a protective instinct.
Declinism. You remember the past is better than it was. Now, I've heard this before as like a nostalgicism or something like that. I think it was. And expect the future to be worse than it will likely be. And I see this all the time. Everybody looks back on of course, for me, the 80s and 90s. It was the heyday. Well, you just laugh like, what? You're like, you mean the 2000s?
Yeah, I wasn't even born yet.
But, so I was a little kid in the 80s and a teenager in the 90s. And, yeah, I totally look back on those times as the heyday of awesomeness.
I even look at this in a smaller time frame. The first thing that came to my mind is maybe people in abusive relationships, and why they tend to get back into those relationships is once they're out, they remember the past as better than it was with the person, and without the person, they expect the future to be worse. And that could be a trap that keeps people in abusive relationships that they might not overall want to be in.
No, that's great. This is why you're here, because I would never have.
Because I'm like, relationships, everything.
No, but I mean, you give a different perspective, where I would not have necessarily jumped to that and thought of that. But, yeah, totally. Let's see. Instead of relying on nostalgic impressions of how great things used to be, use the measurable metrics such as life expectancy, levels of crime and violence, and prosperity statistics. We talked about this earlier as well, whenever we were saying this is the best time in all of history, with the highest life expectancy, lowest level of crime and violence. People always talk about all the school shootings and the shootings everywhere, but if you really look at the statistics and take emotion out of it, no, we're in the safest time of all history. The framing effect. I don't know how many more we have of these. You allow yourself to be unduly influenced by context and delivery. Ooh. If I take some time to slow down and really try to, maybe if we had some nice soft music playing in the background, and I want you to just think about a happy time in your life. I want you all in the audience to just think about your puppies and your little kittens and your childhood. You know what I mean? So that's what this is. The context and delivery of whatever we're saying can influence the way
reception.
that you accept something. Let's see, phrasing of how a question is posed, such as a proposed law being voted on. That's another thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where you see, do you support giving money, increasing pay to our troops? Well, yes, who doesn't support that? Whereas the bill is increasing overall spending on, bombs or something. But the way, you don't support our troops. Do you support our troops? And of course, everybody's going to say yes, because you don't want to say no.
You can't say no.
And that's how they manipulate you there. So only when we have the intellectual humility to accept the fact that we can be manipulated, we can hope to limit how much we are. Again, the whole purpose of Stop the Earth and why we do these exercises and why I'm even talking about biases is you may know all of these. But if there's one that you don't, or one that you need refreshed on, you can never go over this enough to keep yourself from being manipulated. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. Be mindful of how things are being put to you. Your turn.
Fundamental attribution error. You judge others on their character, but yourself on the situation. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, you know why you're being a bit slow. But if you observe someone else being slow, you don't have such knowledge, and so you might presume them to be just a slow person.
We talked about this last show when you're out driving and you don't know a person's situation.
Exactly.
They swerve over in your lane a little bit or whatever, and it's because you're immediately like, that idiot.
And you don't realize that their dog just died and they're just trying to get to the vet's office or...
Yeah, and no, I mean, that doesn't absolve them of responsibility of driving safely, but
I think if we all could just be a little bit more aware of the fact that we're not the only human on Earth, all the other humans around us go through similar things in their lives, have trials, maybe just be a little bit more patient and kind.
It's not only kind to view others' situation with charity, it's more objective too.
Mm-hmm.
Be mindful to also err on the side of taking personal responsibility rather than justifying and blaming. The halo effect. How much you like someone or how attractive they are influences your other judgments of them.
That's true.
That's absolutely 100% true. There are people I give a pass, and there are people that once they have done something that makes me not like them,
it's over.
They have to try harder to do the same thing to get me to. Yeah, if you notice that you're constantly consistently giving high or low marks across the board, it's worth considering that your judgment may suffer from the halo effect.
Optimism bias. You overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes.
I do this all the time. My wife would say that.
There can be benefits to a positive attitude. Nobody's arguing that. But it's unwise to allow such an attitude to adversely affect our ability to make rational judgments.
Right. Let's start a podcast. In just 2 shows, we will have amassed thousands of people. I'm just kidding.
I mean, that'd be great.
So, yeah, optimism bias. I always try to look at the bright side. Always look at the bright side of life. You remember that?
No.
You don't remember that? Oh!
I never remember anything.
This is another situation where I have to stop. Like, I want to stop the show, make you watch Life of Brian, which is an old movie, Monty Python, and then you can come back.
And then I'm welcome back.
I'm singing that, folks, and she's looking at me like, what is this that you're... What is... I don't get that. I'm old.
This one's a tricky one, though. I think it's great to be positive. I mean...
Right.
You just can't let that override your rational judgments.
Well, like it said, if you make rational, realistic judgments, you'll have more to feel positive about.
True.
And we are not necessarily just about positivity or, agreeing with everyone.
Also true.
That's the whole point of Stop the Earth as well. It's we want reality. Mm-hmm. We want to be rational and real, not just overly agreeable and nice to everyone for the sake of right, like because it's not real. That's not reality. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a happy medium. We want to learn and enforce critical thinking more than anything. Not that we're any kind of experts at all. That's another thing. This show is as much for me to just practice and learn as it is for you. Pessimism bias is the exact opposite of that. You overestimate the likelihood of negative outcomes. Just world hypothesis. Your preference for justice makes you presume that it exists. A more just world requires understanding rather than blame. Remember, everyone has their life story. We're all fallible, and bad things happen to good people. I always say this. I say, you can do everything right and still fail, and that's okay.
Life isn't fair.
Let's see how many more we have here.
Oh, the placebo.
In-group bias. You unfairly favor those who belong to your group. Yep, tribalism. The placebo effect. Yeah, we're all pretty familiar with that. You take a medicine, sometimes you claim it works, even though it's fake. And I see a lot of this with homeopathy, acupuncture, that kind of thing. Natural medicine have been proven to be no more effective than placebo. So if you a whole lot of anecdotal evidences where people are just telling their story. I tried this and it worked for me. Mm-hmm. And then everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon and more accept things just because, hey, all these other people, that internet reviews.
Oh, yes.
Of things. And it worked for me. The bystander effect. You presume someone else is going to do something in an emergency situation. This is why they tell you Yeah, and right here, look at this. It's like this was made for the show, for the Stop the Earth. There's an emergency situation. Presume to be the one who will help or call for help. Be the change you want to see in the world. So I've always heard when something happens, don't just yell. You see this, it's a TV trope. Someone call 911. No.
Just call 911.
You're supposed to either call 911 or if you're the one that's actually helping the person, like you're the one doing the chest compressions, you point at someone. You, Melinda.
Specific.
Call 911 because now it's on you. Reactants. You'd rather do the opposite of what someone is trying to make you do.
That's me.
This is very much a teenager-y one.
Oh, my boyfriend could come in and talk about this one a lot.
When we feel our liberty is being constrained, our natural inclination is to resist. However, in doing so, we overcompensate. And you know what? This reactance explains, stop resisting. Because our jaywalker in our earlier example
was this guy.
Just for the sake of he wants to do opposite of what someone's trying to make them do. It's okay to be humble and take a moment so that you don't get beat down.
Right.
The spotlight effect. You overestimate how much people notice how you look and act.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Another one of those teenage ones.
Yeah.
And adult.
Well,
and everyone in between, but
people worry about, part of the reason I recorded maybe 6 or 7 podcasts alone and with other people and scrapped each one because I didn't like the way that, like, I had a spotlight on it. I am my own worst enemy when it comes to judging. How does this sound? Is this entertaining? Will anyone even care or listen to this? And finally just decided to ignore the spotlight effect. I'm way overestimating how much people will notice how bad this is or how,
exactly.
Because if it's entertaining, it falls or stands on its own merit.
And we're back to the beginning.
Now we have 3 minutes to go over all the list of fallacies.
Oh, man.
No, I'm gonna call it on that. I'm gonna say, even though we're biased about our fallacies, we were only biased today, and we didn't get to go over all of the fallacies. So another show, and I'm not gonna do it next show, because we have now that we're getting going and we're on show number 2, we have some exciting guests coming down the line. And you'll just have to look at our website and like our Facebook and that kind of thing to see who's coming up. We've got some cool folks that are going to talk about a bunch of different things that they're into, what they care about, how they're being the change in the world, and then maybe even some people that we disagree with, that kind of thing, and show you how, and actually show us how we can disagree with class.
I like that. Disagree with class. Without
the screaming and talking over each other and interrupting, which would be hard for me, again, because I have a tendency to talk way too much.
That's why we're here, though.
No. Thank you for being on Stop the Earth this hour and joining us. I'm John.
I'm Melinda.
See how that works every time. And I'm just going to walk. If I see her in Walmart, I'll be like, I'm John.
I'm Melinda.
But, be the change you want to see in the world. We'll see you next week with a new show. And again, thank you so much for helping us get started on the Stop the Earth journey. And let us know what you think, what you'd like to see. Peace.
Free socks.